What if you could turn every failure into a system? What if you had a set of rules so well designed that you almost couldn't make a bad decision? One man spent 50 years building exactly that, and then wrote it all down. Today, we're breaking down Principles by Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund. This book is his complete framework for life and work, built from decades of failure, reflection, and radical transparency. It's one of the most rigorous books ever written about decision-making, culture, and personal effectiveness. Let's get into it. Takeaway 1. Dalio opens with his own story, and it begins not with success but with a catastrophic failure. In 1982, he was so confident in his economic predictions that he made massive, concentrated bets. He was completely wrong. Bridgewater nearly went bankrupt. He had to borrow money from his father. It was the most humiliating experience of his professional life. And then something interesting happened. Instead of walking away from finance, he got curious. Why was he wrong? What did he miss? He broke down the failure into its component parts, found the errors in his thinking, and wrote principles to prevent those errors from recurring. That failure, he says, was the most important thing that ever happened to him, not despite being a disaster because of it. Pain plus reflection equals progress. That formula is the heart of the entire book. The action step: the next time something goes seriously wrong, don't just move on, sit with it. Write down exactly what happened, what you thought would happen, and where the gap was. That gap is your lesson. Takeaway 2. Dalio's concept of radical transparency is genuinely unlike anything practiced in most organizations. At Bridgewater, almost every meeting is recorded and accessible to almost everyone in the company. Disagreements happen in public. Weaknesses are documented and discussed openly. Why? Because Dalio believes that most organizations fail not because their people are bad, but because bad ideas survive due to politics, hierarchy, and social dynamics. Smart people with bad ideas outrank less senior people with good ideas, and everyone knows it but no one says it. Radical transparency removes that distortion. If your idea is bad, someone will say so in the room with evidence. This is uncomfortable, very uncomfortable, but it forces a level of intellectual honesty that most organizations never achieve. The personal version: practice radical honesty with yourself. Don't let comfortable illusions survive. Write down your actual beliefs about yourself and your situation, not what you wish were true. Takeaway 3. One of the most valuable concepts in the book is believability-weighted decision-making. Not everyone's opinion is equal. When Dalio needs to make a decision, he weighs input from people based on their track record in that specific domain. This sounds obvious, but it flies in the face of how most organizations and relationships operate. We give equal weight to everyone's opinion because it feels fair. But it's not actually fair to give equal weight to the opinion of someone who has failed repeatedly in a domain and someone who has succeeded consistently. Dalio actually quantifies this at Bridgewater using what he calls dots, a real-time record of every person's positions, decisions, and outcomes. Over time, a person's believability score in each domain becomes a data-driven assessment. The practical version: when you need advice, seek out the person with the best track record in that specific area, not the most popular, the most senior, or the most confident. Track record is everything. Takeaway 4. Dalio has a concept he calls the two yous: you as an actor in your own life, and you as a witness observing yourself. Most people live entirely in the actor mode. They react, they feel, they move through their days as the protagonist of their own story. But the witness, the part of you that can step back and observe your own thinking, your own emotional reactions, your own blind spots, is much rarer and much more valuable. Dalio calls developing this witness the foundation of genuine self-awareness. He argues that most of our worst decisions come from our ego's inability to tolerate being wrong. We construct arguments to defend our positions. We get angry when challenged. We conflate our identity with our ideas. The witness can observe this happening and override it. Practice. After your next disagreement or setback, write a description of it from a neutral third-person perspective. Not "they attacked me," but "person A said X, person B responded Y." The third-person perspective activates the witness. Takeaway 5. Dalio's work principles are built around the idea that great teams require a culture of meritocracy, not hierarchy, not seniority, not tenure. The best idea wins. Always. He describes what he calls an idea meritocracy, a system where anyone in the organization can challenge any decision, any assumption, any leader, as long as they do it through the proper channels and with proper evidence. The junior analyst who spots a flaw in the CEO's reasoning is not only allowed but expected to say so. This doesn't mean democracy. There's still leadership and decision-making authority, but the intellectual hierarchy is based on track record and logic, not organizational chart. Ask yourself, in your team or organization, do good ideas win, or do political ideas win, and what would it take to change that? Takeaway 6. Dalio is fascinated by the machine metaphor. He sees every organization, including life itself, as a machine with inputs, outputs, and mechanisms. When you're not getting the outputs you want, don't blame the outcome, diagnose the machine. Something isn't working. That's a fact. Now ask, which part of the process produced this result? Was it a people problem, the wrong person in the role? Was it a design problem, the wrong process for the goal? Was it an environmental problem? Conditions changed and the machine didn't adapt? This depersonalizes failure in a useful way. You're not a bad person for failing. Your machine has a bug. Find the bug and fix it. Then test again. The scientific method applied to life. Takeaway 7. One of the most counterintuitive principles in the book. Dalio argues that most people's fear of failure is completely backwards. Failure is the mechanism by which you get better. Avoiding failure is avoiding growth. He talks about an evolution loop. You set a goal, you fail to achieve it, you learn from the failure, you upgrade your approach, you try again. Every cycle through that loop makes you better. The only way to not improve is to not try, or to try and not reflect. He also distinguishes between first-order effects and second-order effects of failure. The first-order effect of failure is bad, you lost, you were wrong, it hurts. The second-order effect is good, you learned, you corrected, you're now better. Almost everyone stops at the first order. The great performers live for the second order. Takeaway 8. The book's section on people is some of the most practical writing on talent and hiring ever published. Dalio is ruthless about fit, the right person for the right role, and nothing else will work. He argues that most organizational problems are people problems in disguise. The wrong person in a role will fail regardless of how good the process is, and the right person in a role will find a way to succeed regardless of how imperfect the process is. His framework for hiring: look for values first, then abilities, then skills. Most organizations reverse this. They hire for skills, resume credentials, past experience, and assume values will be fine. But skills can be taught. Values and fundamental abilities cannot. The question to ask in any hiring decision: would I be comfortable if this person represented me? If the answer isn't immediate and enthusiastic, it's no. Takeaway 9. Dalio's personal principles for life come down to 5 steps he calls the 5-step process. Have clear goals, identify the problems preventing you from achieving them, diagnose the root causes of those problems, design a plan to eliminate them, and then execute that plan. Sounds simple. It isn't. Most people are good at the goal-setting step and terrible at the diagnosis step. We confuse symptoms with causes. We treat the fever instead of the infection. We solve the surface problem without touching the underlying system issue. He gives an example: you keep missing deadlines. That's the symptom. Why? Maybe it's poor estimation. Why do you estimate poorly? Maybe you've never held yourself accountable for missed estimates before. Now you have a real diagnosis and a real solution. Ask why 5 times. The first answer is almost never the real answer. Takeaway 10. The book ends with what Dalio calls the arc of a life well lived, and it's more philosophical than you might expect from a hedge fund manager. He talks about his own experience of aging, the transfer of knowledge and responsibility to the next generation, and the gradual shift from accumulation to meaning. The first stage of life is about acquiring skills, money, relationships, status. The second stage is about contributing, using what you've acquired to build things that outlast you. The principles he's written aren't just for Bridgewater. They're his attempt to leave behind a way of thinking, a set of tools that anyone who encounters them can use to live better. That's the final principle. Build something that helps other people after you're gone. What's one principle from your own life that you've learned the hard way? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe for weekly breakdowns of books that will genuinely change how you think and work.